From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. Our guest today on Inside Politics is former Tennessee Governor Phil Bredesen. Mr. Bredesen, along with another former governor, Bill Haslam, are teaming up to find a way to address those hot-button issues that seem to divide us all. It's a new podcast, and it's an effort we'll discuss in some detail in the next several minutes. Governor Bredesen, is always an honor to have him and a pleasure to have him join us on the program. Governor, it's great to see you, and thanks again for talking with us.
I sort of mark my time in politics from all my time sitting in this in this seat with you.
You and former Governor Haslam are doing this podcast where you address the topics, and there seems to be so many of them that divide us these days politically.
Right.
More than anything else, are you just trying in this program to begin to build a dialogue and restore some stability in our political conversations?
Yeah, I think both of us are frustrated with what politics has become. I mean, I got into it for the reasons of wanting to try to solve problems, and it doesn't seem to be about that anymore. It seems to be about, scoring points against the other side. And neither of us think, we're going to save the republic with a podcast, but it's a way to just put an oar in the water and try to show people that there are different ways of looking at things. There are different legitimate ways of looking at things, and the two of us are trying to explore that. The
title of the podcast is "You Might Be Right." What are you trying to say with that? And I think it's based on some Tennessee political leader who actually sort of more or less popularized that kind of phrase.
Yeah, it's Howard Baker, man, he was a Republican, obviously, but somebody I admire very much. Had some chance to work with a little bit, and he was known for he was partisan. He had strong views about issues, but always had an open mind to say, the other person might be right. And it was really, pivoting off of that was where the name came from. And this is being done, under the auspices of the Howard Baker Center at the University of Tennessee. So it's a natural thing.
You mentioned Senator Baker was on the other side, the other political party. You did have a couple of opportunities to meet with him and talk with him. You were aware of his ability, and I probably saw some indications of that, how he not only talked about walking across the aisle, but actually went over and crossed the aisle.
I certainly had heard about those. I first met him when I went to Japan as governor, and he was ambassador there. And he took some time after a reception we did and so on to sit down and talk with me, and I really appreciated that. And then back here, I went up to Huntsville one day and spent the day with him, talking. So I can't say he's been a super mentor or I've had a lot to do with him, but it was a real honor to meet somebody that I had heard so much about, and I think did so much good for the country.
I read that you two had a common interest in the energy and environmental policy. What areas did you talk about when you had a discussion about that?
What we were trying to do was to say, not is the globe warming or not, but to talk to people about sort of the different approaches and the things you might do. The two people we had on that, which is actually next week's podcast, were Al Gore, who obviously is a passionate advocate for this is a existential problem and we need to fix it. And we also talked with a guy named Jeff Lyash, who's the CEO of TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, which is the biggest public utility in the country, who also believes that it's a problem, but he has the responsibility of making sure that your lights go on in the evening and your furnace works, and the costs are not too high for that. So I guess the contrast between the two, one who's got practical problems to deal with, and Al, who's done a wonderful job of bringing the issues to the fore, I thought was really interesting and was very informative to me.
Taking your environmental conversations with Senator Baker back into your podcast, did you have an occasion where you were having a discussion about an environmental issue, and one of the two of you said something that you said, hey, the other guy here might be right. He's got a good idea about that subject.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, in almost all of these podcasts, there was something I learned in there that I said, I've always thought about it this way, but they might be right. In this particular one, I've always been an opponent of not enthusiastic at all about these modular nuclear reactors, which are the latest thing to talk about. After talking with Jeff Lyash, I said, I might just be wrong about that, and I need to go do some more research. I mean, not that I have any influence over it, but I would like to know, whether they could play a role.
You mentioned the Baker Center and how it's involved in the production of your podcast. What exactly are they doing to help you and Governor Haslam put this together?
They're doing the kind of the organizing of it. Marianne Wanamaker, who is the CEO of the Baker Center, has been intimately involved with this, and obviously doing a podcast is not terribly complicated. It's not as much as doing a TV show, but there's a lot of logistics to deal with, and they've handled all that stuff.
Senator Baker had the nickname, the reputation of being the Great Conciliator. Why are there so few elected officials like Senator Baker today?
I think it's a combination of things. I think that there's always elected officials who care more about getting reelected than anything else. Since we've gotten so sophisticated about gerrymandering and drawing districts, there's very few people who are worried about losing a general election anymore. They worry about losing primaries on both sides of the aisle, and I think that just drives to the extremes. You can't afford to offend the extremes of your party, and I think that helps. I think also just the nature of news today. I certainly remember, as I'm sure you do, when there were 3 channels, and there was some common view in the country of what the world was about.
Now there's 300 channels.
Now there's 300, and you can pick one that whose views correspond exactly to your worldview, and
what
is
it that
help.
makes our political leaders and their supporters seem to want to win the debate or score points on an issue rather than try to do anything to try to solve it?
I think it's just that. I think it's that same thing, which is they're too concerned about their reelection and about playing the game and scoring points and not enough about solving problems. The whole premise of this podcast is precisely that you've identified. It's to say, look, I think both Bill and I feel, there's real problems out there, and we need to be spending our energy trying to find solutions.
Former Tennessee Governor Phil Bredesen is our guest on Inside Politics. We're talking about a new podcast that he's doing with another former governor, Bill Haslam. It's called You Might Be Right. We'll talk more about the podcast after this break.